those of you who watch this show and this channel know that I prefer to try and give balanced, thoughtful, and as much as possible, objective analysis, even when it comes to mock drafts and everything that happens during the draft season. I try not to dive into or even wade into the hot take waters. And in fact, I have a bit of an aversion to those who make that part of their identity. But today, we're diving in. We're doing this for fun. Today, I'm joined by Josh and Mitch from the 12 Talk Pod across the pond, and we are going to give you our hot Seattle draft takes, the biggest curveballs, the biggest surprises, the craziest trends that we could see happening during this draft that we could possibly come up with. And then we'll tie it all in a bow at the end with our hot take mock draft. Try to see how much we can shock you and how much you hate it, or maybe you don't. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Let's go.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
All right, boys. How are you? It's good to see you.
Fantastic, mate. It's nice to be on. You've been on ours plenty of times, but we're finally coming to you across the pond.
There you go. Just in time for what shapes up to be one of the most entertaining drafts, not just in the Seahawk world. When you have 5 of the top 92 picks, there's going to be entertainment and intrigue, certainly. But even just this first round, right? I mean, this is one of the more unpredictable drafts I can ever remember approaching. And I think that's the biggest piece of evidence to support that is here we sit 6 days away from the first round, and all 32 teams still hold on to their native pick in the first round. Not one single trade has happened. This is we hit this mark a couple of weeks ago where it was the closest we ever got to the draft without that happening. And it looks like now everyone's going to sit tight at least until the first round. Lots of intrigue, lots of entertainment, right?
Yeah,
100%.
It's a really fascinating thing, that, because usually by now the first, second, or third pick have changed hands for a king's ransom, or someone's traded a player and picked up an extra second or first or whatever. But I don't see, like you, I don't see another trade happening between now and draft day. So are we going to see a shuffling board on the night? We might do. It's fascinating to see how that goes.
Yeah, indeed. And for the right, what time is it where you guys are? It's like 7 or 8 o'clock, right?
It's 8 p.m.
Okay. So it's officially past noon here where I am. So I've got my coffee, but I'm going to set that aside. It's time to crack a beer.
There we go.
We're going with the Sam Adams Cold Snap Spring White Lager today.
Oh, very nice.
My favorite spring beer. All right, guys, you ready for some hot takes?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
This was a fun idea, but when I dug into it, I kind of found it hard to come up with any takes that I would deem as being too extreme, just because of the unpredictability of this class, like the lack of consensus in the top 100 of this class. I've talked about this before, but I went and did an audit the other day. I took like 10 of the biggest name mock drafts that you see out there, and there were almost 50 different names represented in all of those mock drafts. That's a much wider range this close to the draft than I've ever seen before. And then, when you talk about 18 for the Seahawks, and then you look at the 30 visit list, right, which usually in Seattle is filled much more with guys that appear to be day 3 prospects, players that didn't go to the combine, potential undrafted free agents, players that they just need to get to know. This year, it's half of that list are guys that are projected roughly around where they might pick in the first round. Does that make you nervous that, like, oh, maybe there's some uncertainty, they're not dialed into that yet? Or are you excited by the options? Josh, start with you.
I'm excited by the options, because to me, it strikes that they aren't set on who they're picking at 18. They've obviously seen the mocks. They've got their own big board, and they've gone, these players could be available. And we'll see it in our hot takes later. But if that's the case, and they're interviewing all these guys, they're going, well, every one of these people can give us value. But who will be available and who could give us the most value? We need to dig a bit deeper. We need to do some physicals, have some one-on-one interviews with them, and really see who will suit being a Seahawk. And that's what it really excites me to see that, because it is, at the moment, it's a coin flip.
Yeah.
Who it could be.
Mitch, do you have a favorite right now at 18?
I absolutely do. Yeah. I mean, from the players that I think will fall to 18, Jalen Walker would be my dream Seahawk. I think Emanori's got a much better chance of being there. And I think the impact and the suitability to a Mike Mack defense is similar. But Jalen Walker, I'm running to that podium. I think he's a superb player. And he would be electric to watch. So Jalen Walker's my guy.
He's one of those guys that kind of exemplifies, he could kind of serve as a poster child for the unpredictability of this class. You see him mocked as high as top 10. There's some scouts that say he's not getting out of the top 10. He's just he's got that kind of dynamic upside. And he's also that kind of dog and that kind of dude mentality that you want in your locker room. And then you see, because of the questions about like, what's his role? Where does he fit? Right? Is he a tweener? Do we really know what he is? You'll see some scenarios where he does make it to Seattle at 18. Like the realm of possibilities there with a player like that is kind of all over the place. Are you prepared though? Jahad Campbell kind of fits in that same bucket, I think, where, if that's the pick at 18 and fans see inside linebacker, are you prepared for the backlash if they do something like that? I mean, that's not one of our hot takes that the three of us came up with, but I could see that scenario. I could see the confusion among this fan base if we were to go inside linebacker there.
I don't see it. I don't know why it'd be confusion, because when you look at that room, it's still pretty sparse with top talent. Tyrese Knight came in the mid part of sort of last season, and I think he did fantastically for where he was picked and obviously where he was projected to sort of play. But I think if you can add a game-changing X factor inside linebacker to work alongside your Ernest Jones as well, why would you not take that? Yeah, I don't want to delve too deep into sort of the hot takes till we get there, but
right.
Linebacker for me is up there.
And he can play edge. I think the appeal of a guy like Walker is he'd be that chess piece, which I think absolutely Mike McDonald would figure out a way to use. And we saw circumstances last year, more so before Terrell Dodson and Jerome Baker were jettisoned from the roster, where he would still bring Tyrese Knight in and go with three linebackers at times and kind of mix and match those guys a little bit. We didn't see as much of that when it was Jones and Knight. We didn't see Drake Thomas really getting worked in there. They used safeties more in that role, but yeah, I could absolutely see that. Josh, do you have a favorite at 18, or I guess in the same realm of that question, a prediction of who you think is most likely to be the pick?
My personal favorite, I'd love Will Johnson, and I'll go into why later as my hot take.
Right. Yeah,
I do see the Jalen Walker, Jahad Campbell, if they're available, like Mitch said, there could be just a sprint off to the podium.
Yeah.
And
my guy and I've been pretty consistent on this. Josh and I were talking about it a little bit, Mitch, before you got here, before we hit live. It's Kenneth Grant. It's I got to a point where I started overthinking it and working different scenarios, because he was my early first love, and then kind of fell, the old adage about when you're taking a multiple choice question or a test about, just trust your first answer. Don't change it. It's right. Like 75% of the time. He just makes a lot of sense to me for so many reasons, of which we can still get into a little bit, because that might be a little bit of a precursor to my hot take as well.
Yeah. I really like Kenneth Grant. I think he's great. Yeah. I think it's not a sexy pick necessarily in comparison to what we might take, but he is going to make that D-line immeasurably better. And we've got recent investment into it with a first-round pick that you're going to get levels out of because of him being there at nose. So I think it makes sense.
All right, let's get into this. We'll go alphabetically. So Josh first, okay? Let me show the graphic here, and then the stage is going to be yours, and you'll get a chance to justify it. So, oh boy, we're going to start. We're just gonna tear the Band-Aid off right off the bat and just start with this one. Well, let's go in reverse order. I should have flipped these. You predict that the Seahawks will move a player at some point in the draft for a pick or picks. We'll get some specific ideas from you here in a second. And then no offensive line until the third round. Now, I've played with a lot of scenarios and, in fact, been a proponent of the idea and tried to educate my viewership on the idea that because of the depth and quality of the interior offensive line class, you don't want to take one necessarily in the first round, because the pairing of then what you can get in the second round just isn't as strong. But third round, Explain yourself.
So, and we said this off air as well. This draft class is so deep in O linemen that you can take someone who will be serviceable. The 12s around the world have just absolutely lost it about how our O line's underperformed over the years. But what they need to do is sort of take a sort of step back and look at the investment that's been put in there. They're actively trying to get better. They've been drafting O linemen pretty much every single year. And then you look at who we've got and the average age with your Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, Satawa Lamea. You've got Anthony Bradford, who shows up from time to time. You've got Oluwatimi as well. I think everyone has just sort of completely neglected the fact that we have invested there and they're young players. And we were saying offline, when it comes from playing essentially a semi-pro college level to the NFL, the step up is huge. There's not many players that come in, hit the ground running, and they are an X factor weapon.
Yeah.
O-line must be one of the most difficult ones to take that step up because you've got the weight gain, you've got the gym work, you've got learning all the plays, everything in there, and you're coming up against experienced veterans, men. It's going to be difficult to hit the ground running in your first season. You can't look at someone in their first season as a low lineman and go, he is rubbish, absolute trash, throw him away. Let's just keep cycling through these picks of O linemen and not let anyone have a chance to develop. Let no one train. You've got Satawa Lamea currently training with Abe Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wants to improve. He's seen what the dedication Abe's got and how much he's a talisman for this O-line. He's gone, I want to learn that. I genuinely think that with our first 3 picks in this draft, we're going to start looking at more impactful positions and where we can get them. Because of the depth of the O-line, why are you going to just spend one of your first 3 picks on an O-lineman when you could get sort of my sort of top positions? Cornerback, I think that's a room that needs to be drastically improved. Linebacker as well, as we just mentioned. And another wide receiver, a young wide receiver in the second round who can learn from your Cooper Kupps now, because it's reported that he's already in the VMAC training and there's the whole mindset shifting with people that are actually coming in before they're supposed to. Jake Bobo is following round Cooper Kupp. So why not get another round 2 wide receiver who can become an X factor and learn behind them rather than going into the doldrums of the draft, round 6 and 7, pick someone up, hope they're going to be a special teamer and might be effective. Use those first 3 picks on meaningful talent in X factor positions, game-changing positions.
When you first sent me your hot takes, I read it wrong the first time. I thought you were saying no offensive line till day 3. Day 3, not the 3rd round, in which case I immediately thought of that scene from draft day when they were picketing outside the VMAC, right? And holding up signs and burning hanging the GM in effigy, and they'd want to burn the place down. It's gonna be bad even if when they don't take an offensive lineman in the first round, because we have to sleep on it for a night. And there's going to be fans that, I might just stay off Twitter that night, like altogether.
I mean, we've been running a series called Draft Crushes over on our
right,
pod,
yeah.
and you were the first guest on it.
And I know it well. Yeah.
And we've had some fantastic guests, but everyone in the comments, all of our followers on our Discord, everyone, they've all got these severe crushes on O linemen that are going to go in the first 2 rounds. And I understand that. And I understand that what I'm doing now is basically just throwing a grenade into the Seahawks fandom. But there are other players out there, depending on what scheme you're going to run, depending on how the interviews go, how you feel they're going to fit into this team. You don't have to take one of those players that everyone's crushing on, that you see the name appear on Twitter all the time or on someone else's YouTube from one of the other draft analysts. There's other people out there. And I think that's where I think that Mike Mack is going to want to go with this.
One thing, just to let those of you who are watching know, is at the end of all this, we're going to do a mock draft. And what we're going to do is, as much as we can, and I think we did a good enough job. We didn't work these out ahead of time. We just we all did them independently. we're going to try to apply all 6 of our hot takes to the draft and try to check all those boxes. And so right off the bat, we aren't going to take an offensive lineman until the 3rd round, just as an example. But also, and I know we were talking before we went live about which mock draft simulator to use, and then it just gave me the idea. So I just switched it. We're going to use the PFF one because it allows you to trade players for picks. That's your other hot take. So who are the players, who are the suspects that could be on the trading block that you think would have some realistic value to actually be able to fetch some picks at some point during this draft?
Mitch will know this well, and any one of our listeners and viewers will know. I am over the Tariq Woolen experiment. He's in his final year of his rookie deal. He's going to be wanting a big contract. I don't think he suits what Mike Mack wants or sees in a cornerback. I think there's too many weak points in his game. When you watch his tape, he looks fantastic just purely due to the athleticism, that makeup speed. But I'm a rugby coach, and tackling, the fundamentals of tackling in a contact sport is something that it should be drilled into you, and it should be second nature, but it's not for him. He's a converted wide receiver. I completely understand that. But as a coach, you work on someone to say that is something missing for you, get from your game. We need to get that to become your second nature. You know how to do that. But every time, and after his first season, when you look at his second season, people were just throwing it short and letting them run at him because you could see the fear in his eyes and the awful angles that he was taking, the body shape when he's hitting people with the bent back and he's not hinging at the hips properly. It really irks me every time I see it. I think there's teams out there that are going to be needy for cornerbacks that if you say Tariq Woolen is on the trade block, they will take him and they will give you a 2nd or 3rd round pick. I think 2nd would be rich, but possibly a 3rd round pick.
It makes a ton of sense in that sort of vacuum because it isn't that strong of a cornerback class. And it's especially lacking in, long physical boundary corners. And, especially once you get past day 2, you get into day 3 and it's a lot of 5'10", a lot of slot only guys, undersized guys. And that's not what most NFL teams are looking for. Right. And so even with the concerns about, his tackling issues that he's had and maybe some of his unwillingness to come up and be physical in the run game, which really surprises me because I remember one of the first things that I saw after we drafted him. I was aware of him just because of the rawness and just the raw athleticism and how long he was. I was intrigued by him. And so I watched a little bit of him. And the first thing that stood out, he has some reps on tape from UTSA where he's coming up and murdering guys, where he's really willing. He's throwing his body around. And so maybe that changed because now he's playing for a paycheck. I don't know. I was willing to give him a pass 2 years ago because he was playing through a shoulder injury. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. You're going to be a little hesitant. And then last year there were some off-field issues. There was a game he was suspended at the beginning of it and didn't play right away because I think he missed a curfew or something. It's, it's rumors, not reports when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I don't like to spend too much time on it, but it would be a shame that we're here because just a year ago, Leslie Frazier is on with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks talking about how they think so highly of him that they think he could be a guy that follows number 1 receivers and instead of just sticking to one side. So it would be unfortunate, but it makes a lot of sense too. If somebody wants to give you a decent enough pick in this draft because they miss out on a Will Johnson or a Benjamin Morrison or a Jahdae Barron or whoever, take your pick, then they're probably, if you miss out on a corner and you need one, Seattle's probably your first phone call. And so from that standpoint, it's still a hot take though, because the fans don't want to see it. Most of them.
Exactly. But I mean, you look, so Miami is shopping Jalen Ramsey at the moment.
Right.
So they're going to be in need of an outside corner.
Yeah.
And their team is purely built on speed. Mm-hmm. What does Woolen have? Speed.
Yeah.
So they're the type of team that I could see picking up the phone and saying, we'll give you a 3rd round pick. Give us Tariq Woolen.
And I'm super intrigued by the fact they brought Shaq Griffin in for a visit again last week. I think he played really well in Minnesota last year, even though he wasn't a full-time starter. And it surprised me to see that he's still just 29 years old. And And, he's just a perfect locker room guy. He's not going to give you any issues if he's not the full-time starter. I kind of think whether they move on from Woolen or not, he might be an after the draft signing and one that I think would be a really smart depth piece. Okay, so those are the first two. Let's see what Mitch has here in store for us. Okay, now we're still talking about cornerbacks. He wants to go corner really, really early. And then now this one might cause the Seahawks organization to have to put some chain link around the VMAC if it were to happen. All defense the first 2 days, not the first 2 rounds, the first 2 days. So this is what I thought Josh was saying, and I read it wrong. You're not taking an offensive lineman or a receiver until day 3. What do you have to say for yourself?
First thing, I'm not taking a tight end there either. So wide receiver, tight end, or O-line. Right. But
thankfully, no running back in the second round either. So that should at least make some of the fan base happy.
For the first time in how many years? Yeah, I think my reason for putting that in there as a hot take is that the high ceiling players that I think will fall in the first round, the Eminoris, the Jalen Walkers, Jihad Campbells, Kenneth Grant, players like that'll be available. I think they'll be hard to not take. And the wide receivers in this class, there's some red flags around those as well. I think O-line in round 1's a bit rich. So I think defense in round 1 is probably like a 70-30, chance at the moment. I think we're maybe even 80-20. When you get into round 2, that is a sweet spot for edge, which is a need. And it's also the end for me. That's the cliff for the cornerback position. So if your first round pick isn't a corner, perhaps 50 and 52 will be someone like Princely Mielen, who I think is a great shout for a round 2 pick. And there's some great shots there at a corner in that round. Once we get into round 3, there'll be some good O linemen there, but I could also see some of those defensive tackles being brought in. I think we'll take multiple, or at least an edge and a tackle, or a nose tackle and like a 3-tech kind of interior rusher. So there's talent there that I think is really relevant to how we can improve. And I think that the depth of the O-line class and the wide receiver class means that, you could get that later. The other thing I'd say about the state of our defense, I think what was built last year was in the end, after the linebacker shuffle, I think we ended up having quite an efficient, built-for-purpose machine, but it lacks a little bit of X factor in certain spots to shut down games, get you off the field, wreck the game for a quarterback. There's just a sprinkling of stardust missing from what is quite an efficient machine now, and I think that gives the offense a great chance if we can pound the rock. Bit of stardust in the defense. I think that's a recipe.
Interesting way to frame it, that the defense was so efficient. And to your point of going with a playmaking secondary player early, the one thing that was lacking was takeaways, was dynamic, game-changing plays. Just not enough effect being made on the ball, right? We just didn't feel that as much. So you mentioned Will Johnson, and certainly he's someone that I kind of had dismissed as a guy that could be a Seahawk, because initially I thought, okay, if teams value the tape more than the testing and they don't care about the 40 time, and the tape is so good, especially the 23 tape when he was fully healthy, that, there's no way he gets to 18. Maybe now there is, with some of the concerns about durability and the long speed, and maybe not a scheme fit with every team. If you're playing, if you're a team that likes to play full-time press man corner or press man coverage, not really his strength, he can do it, but that's where the long speed comes into play a little bit more. But in a Mike McDonald scheme, his instincts and his ability to play the ball in zone, it fits like a glove. But if he should go higher than that, who would, to your hot take point, who would be a couple other corners that you'd be cool with them taking in the first round?
In the first round, maybe even Revel. Is it Revel?
Is it Revel? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Big fan. I think as long as he's passing physicals, with flying colors, I think he creeps back into the first round, because that's a guy who was projected to go top 10 with just reason as well. He's super physical. I think he's such a Seahawks, a typical, maybe not a Mike Mack exact prototype, but when you look at what the Seahawks have done over the years, physicality and competitiveness and juice and, a barking dog, I love that. And I think he can bring that back.
Yeah, and honestly, if the knee checks out, and the Seahawks had him in it at the VMAC, and so they, certainly I'm sure they did all their imaging and everything else, and if they're satisfied with the ACL, and Jesus, guys come back from the ACLs so much quicker nowadays. I don't know if you guys saw the video of Curtis Rourke doing 7-step drops and throwing the football the other day, 4 months after ACL surgery. It just continues to get, more and more advanced in how they recover from those. But if he is fully healthy and there's no concern there, like, he's the better tackler of the two. There's some reps on tape. They played Michigan early in the season before he got hurt, and there were a couple of goal line situations where he's coming up and just smacking guys. It's impressive to see. It's almost like when I watched Devin Witherspoon tape from Illinois for the first time, except he's doing it at 210 pounds instead of 185. Like, it's impressive to watch.
That's the key thing for me, because he almost stonewalls people. He plays so hard, but in control with good technique. And that's what I really, really like about him. He's always in control. With Devin Witherspoon, I won't say a bad word about him, because I love him. He is so exciting to watch, and he comes up in the clutch every time. He's always seems to be third down. Someone has the stupidity to throw his direction, and he gets something on it every time. It's great.
Yeah.
But what I do like is to see a defender with sound technique and the size to be able to lay that hit and withstand it, rather than wincing when I see people throwing bodies, under the truck. So
yeah,
I think that's really interesting. If he checks out physically, that could be really, really good.
Now, Barron has a similar play style. Like, that guy's not afraid to throw his body around. He'll stick his nose in there, and he can play slot outside. He can even play some safety. Like, he's an interesting chess piece. He's just a smaller guy. Is Barron another guy that you would consider there?
Yeah, what I like there is the positional versatility. I think when Mike Mack's looking at pieces he can move around and disguise, drop someone, if you're playing a 3 safety look, you can move someone like that around. I think there's a serious scheme fit there, and the sort of situation that Mike Mack would lick his lips for. Yeah. So that I really like. He's not my favorite prospect, but I would fully understand if we took him for that reason, to be honest.
Yeah, and if we did in that scenario, I've given this a lot of thought. One of my initial reactions to that would be that here, I'm looking up to get his weight. Where is he on my big? Because he's a thicker build than Devin Witherspoon, and so I would, my first initial thought, and I can't find him, is that maybe he becomes your full-time slot guy, and that allows Devin Witherspoon to play more on the boundary, which is something long-term that I've been advocating. Especially ever since I don't know if you guys saw the podcast when he sat down with John Gruden and had that conversation. Yeah. Right. It was a great conversation. It's fun to watch. If any of you haven't watched it, check it out. One of the things he talks about is how he's in there, when he plays inside all the time, he's taking on guards. 185 pounds. I don't want that for him or for the team long-term. Like, I don't mind mixing and matching, right, situationally, and moving them in there. But at some point, and there's some of the safeties that you've touched on too. If you take a Nick Emmanwori or even a Malachi Starks, like, they could play that role as well, and maybe relieve some of those responsibilities for Witherspoon there. So, yeah, cool stuff. All right, you ready for mine?
Yes,
let's do it.
Here's what I got. First of all, I think they're taking two defensive tackles in this draft, and I'll explain my reasoning in a second, and then I think they're taking running back earlier than you think. And by you, I mean the fans, right? Now, let me qualify that. I don't think they're not taking a running back on the second day. They're not. But I could see them take running back as early as the 4th, or as late at the latest, I think, with those 2 5th-rounders they have late in the 5th round. And here's my reason for that. First of all, it's an outstanding running back class. 30 to 35 draftable grades on most big boards for running backs. That is historically wealthy when it comes to the running back class. Like, it is one of the deepest classes I've ever seen. And you can get value all the way up and down the draft board in every round, any shape, size, style you want. Kenneth Walker's in the last year of his deal. Kenny McIntosh has had some injury issues, and we really don't know what he is. We got to see a glimpse of it finally at the end of last year, and it looked good. And I do think he's a better fit for this scheme because he's so decisive in his first cut. I think he'd fit in really well. Zach Charbonnet, we've seen some great games out of him, but I still just the lack of initial first step burst concerns me a little bit. Although he played a lot of wide zone at UCLA under Chip Kelly, great fit. So like him, but then, we're going to be talking about him as an extension candidate a year from now too. And then George Helani, he's a fourth guy. I think he's a replacement level player. The team likes him, but the whole reason that he didn't get drafted in the first place is he had a bunch of durability issues as well. Clint Kubiak likes to use 2 running backs as much as anyone in the league. And that's something we haven't seen in Seattle for a long time. So I think you're rostering 4 running backs, and they haven't done that in a while. They've rostered 3, period. Except when Nick Bellore was around and he kind of took up one of those spots sort of as a pseudo fullback.
Everything.
Yeah. Typically when there's a very, very strong position group, you want to tap into that, whether it's a a certified need on your roster or not. But also this, they don't have a kick returner on the roster at the moment. They really don't. Like, they can make do, right? They could piece it together. McIntosh returned some kicks at times. But they dropped 2 returners, and with this new kickoff rule, with them moving the penalty now out to the 35, right? I think that's gonna foster more returns in the game. They obviously prioritize that skill set because they carried D freaking Williams on the roster for half the season last year when he gave them nothing in the return game, and that was the whole reason he had a 53-man roster spot. And so I think when you get to day 3, if you've checked the boxes that you wanted to check heading into that point, it's such a deep class. Some guys are going to fall, and there's going to be some value there, and guys that can help you, even if he might not give you much as a rookie outside of potentially some returns. That I just find it hard to believe that they're not going to tap into that class. I don't. Give me your guys' thoughts on that before I talk about defensive tackles for a moment.
Go, Mitch.
I think John Schneider loves a running back, and I don't think he can do it. I don't think he, like you say, I don't think he can do it on day 2. As soon as we get into day 3, there will be a host of running backs that he likes. There'll be, like you said earlier, there are all kinds of running backs in this class. So whatever they are looking for the new offense, there will be a good fit. So it's going to be very tempting. The heads in the room are going to be looking at running backs. I think you're absolutely right. Jarquez Hunter, I think we had in on a visit.
Yeah.
And he's a running back I really like. If you're looking to pick someone up on day 3, I really like him. And he's one of those running backs that isn't polished in the receiving game, not great with his pass blocking, those little not extra bits anymore.
You can say that about almost everyone in this class outside of Travion Henderson. Like, the learning curve is just immense with all those guys.
Yeah, and I think what you shop for in a running back these days, what you want to see some level of capability and versatility in that way. But he gives you something really, really good in those explosive plays. He ran a really fast 40. It shows on his tape. The lateral agility to find a gap and hit it is there. I think if you were to look at trading someone like Walker, with it being his last year, if you're not planning on paying him and you get a good offer for a second or a third, picking up someone like him would allow you to still have that sort of shake and go, hit a gap and rip off 20, 30 yards on the roster. He's not Ken Walker, don't get me wrong, but that if you're looking to replace the style and what you can scheme for, he can do that. So yeah, I agree.
Brashard Smith's another guy out of SMU that's kind of on most boards. He's ranked in that 4th round area. Converted receiver, really quick and explosive, but he's pretty sturdily built for that size as well. And he has kick return experience under his belt as well. He's a guy that would make some sense and kind of fit into that narrative, what I'm talking about there. And then my other one is I think I think the lack of depth on the defensive line right now for the Seahawks is something that fans either refuse to acknowledge or they're just not aware of. I've had so many fans, even when I take Grant in the first round, come back to me with defense. Our defensive line's fine. Someone told me this on the live feed last night. Our defensive line's fine. We don't need a defensive lineman early. Well, outside of Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, and Jaron Reed, what do you have? I mean, Cam Young has given us absolutely nothing, and I don't think we haven't seen anything from him to think that he will suddenly. Mike Morris didn't take any kind of a step forward last year or work his way into the rotation or earn any reps at all, and that disappointed me, and I don't think he fits. They have to, if Jaron Reed goes down, he's on the other side of 30. Leonard Williams is 30 now. They need to get Byron Murphy off of nose tackle. Talked about this with Brandon Kane last night, so he can focus on being the 3 technique that we all think he can be. They need multiple defensive linemen there. It's one of the position groups, as much as any on the field, that you rotate heavily. You need 5-6 guys there. And right now they have 3, literally. There's nobody, and they haven't added anyone. And that tells me something. Usually part of John Schneider's identity and his MO that he hasn't leaned into as much this offseason is hedging all of the needs on the roster with these low-cost 1-year veteran deals, right? He got beat up last year because he signed 7 or 8 of those types, and none of them really contributed. But yet they eat up because they're all veterans, right? And they're all guys that have some sort of resume. And these 1-year deals, there's nowhere for the cap hit to be spread out. It kind of eats into that. Well, this year, the approach this offseason seems to have been, and I like this, more quality over quantity. And they have not added a single defensive tackle at any level. Not a young guy with upside that slipped through the cracks, not a Jonathan Hankins type like they brought in last year. And that tells me that they're eyeing the draft, and they need to add a couple of guys. And I think they'll be different stylistically, right? If you take a Kenneth Grant or a Derek Harmon early, a guy who isn't necessarily a full-time nose tackle, but can play nose tackle, certainly, and then you can move around. Then maybe later in the draft, you can take a smaller guy, more of a penetrating, an Omar Norman Lott type that isn't going to be stout at the point of attack, but man, he can knife upfield and he can get to the passer a little bit and affect things in that way, or vice versa, where if you take one of those guys kind of early on, then you can double back. And there's some guys later in this draft that do project as early down run stuff or more of your stereotypical kind of limited one-trick pony nose tackles. I think it's a massive need on this roster that's being ignored.
I agree. We said it sort of off air, and when you look at the average age of the D line, and when you have someone like I said Hankins, who came in last year, he was an older vet, and he was just a space eater in the middle at nose tackle, but they ended up putting Murphy there a bit more as well. I think this is something that, especially from a Mike Mack point of view, when you have a defensive head coach, he's going to look at his defense and say, I need to mold this into what I want. And starting up front, I think he needs to have some youth behind these experienced veterans. I think he's going to start looking at who he sees as really coachable and future-proofing himself, because he's still got another 5 years on his contract. So, there's nothing to say that Leonard Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence, Jay Reed, they might retire in 2 years, 3 years. He needs someone on the back burner there, ready to go, to learn behind these guys and then just thrust straight in. I'll admit I'm disappointed with Cam Young, because he athletically, he showed some flashes of what he could do, but he's just not been there through injury and whatever else.
Can't get on the field.
That's it. I think Mitch is more bummed out about Mike Morris than most, because he called that Mike Morris pick on one of our pre-draft pods.
He was one of my guys in that draft too. I loved that pick. And look, I've kind of given up on Cam Young. I'm ready to move on. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for him to make this roster. I still have hope for Mike Morris. It'll be interesting to see how he shows up to camp. What kind of role do they see him in? Do they get him back closer to 300 like he played at times at Michigan, so they can play him inside and out, or do they try to slim him down a little bit, have him focus more on edge? But haven't quite given up on him yet. But the other little bullet point to this take as well, just like I said with the running backs, it's such a strong class that you want to tap into it as much as you can. Daniel Jeremiah, I think his number is something, it's either 24 or 27. It's either even or odd. It's stuck in my head. Starter grades that he has on defensive tackles in this class. And he says that's about double an average year.
Yeah.
So you want to take advantage of that. Like, you want to be a trench team. You want to build this team in the identity that Mike McDonald has said. And he talks about the run wall and how physical he wants to be up front. You're not getting that done with 2 30-year-olds and a second-year player.
No, you're not. And it's seen as a position of strength when you look at how it performed last season and who we brought in. And then you've got Chenna coming back on the edge as well, with Hall, who had a breakout, and then Mafe. But I think if you're going to have a position of strength, add strength to it. If it's such a deep draft class, you want to keep adding to that, because if you can keep rotating these guys and making them effective with whatever their skill set is, their propensity to whatever move or where they play, do it. And if there's 24 or 27 guys with first round grades, do it. And they can sit for a year. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I when you said this hot take to us, I thought, I can see it happening now. I really, really can, because especially with the way Mike Mack's defense likes to move players around, he can have his specific noses, but then when it comes to his 3 techs, he can move them all over. He can have them sort of playing as a big edge as well. I think that's where Mike Morris is going to look. And I really want to see him kick on this year, but I think this would be a fantastic draft to add that depth on the D-line.
So here's... go ahead. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to quickly to add to that. I think there's a bunch of really good late round 2, early round 3 hybrid defensive end, defensive tackle, possible 3 technique fits as well. Players like Josiah Stewart, Jordan Birch, that can help patch up that need for an edge and give you an extra body for interior D-line as well. I think that might be your way to address 2 needs in one as well, plus a need for a nose tackle. Once you factor that in, 2 defensive tackles, I could see it.
That's a really good point. And if that's what they end up doing, I'll come back and say, see, they did take 2 defensive tackles. Right? Because there are, it's a very strong class for the big edge, the big defensive end type kind of hybrid, as you say, the 280 to 285 pound guy that isn't twitchy, right? He's not just going to beat you as a dynamic pass rusher, but he can reduce inside and maybe is a little too stiff to play on the edge full time. I would throw Nick Scorton into that bunch. I would throw Landon Jackson into that bunch. You mentioned Jordan Birch, JT Tuamolo out. Some of those guys, can do a little bit of that too. You don't want them playing inside full time, but they can help you on the edge and also reduce inside. Here's what I like about our 6 hot takes in the context of applying these to a mock draft is none of them cancel any of the other ones out, right? So just to recap, we are not going to take an offensive lineman. Well, originally, Josh, I guess these 2 do conflict a little bit. You said not until the 3rd round, but Mitch said not until the 3rd day. So we're going to go with that. We're going to stick it. It kind of, compromises the 2 of yours. We're not going to take an offensive lineman until the 4th round. We're going to trade Reek Woolen. We're going to take a cornerback early. Let's take him in the 1st round, just kind of to see how it falls after that. Then we're going to concentrate the rest of those first 5 picks on defense. We're going to take 2 defensive tackles, and we're going to take a running back no later than those 2 picks at the end of the 5th round. Sound good?
I like it.
All right, let's do it.
This is going to be very interesting, I think.
Indeed. And then watch at the end of it all, watch it end up looking more Seahawks do than all of the other mock drafts that we've been doing over the last few months.
Can I just say as well, we were very hot on the comments on our pod as well, and I'm watching the comments fly in and the conversations going on.
I haven't even looked at them yet. Yeah,
amazing.
I'm not ignoring you guys. I just think for the format of the show, it'd be better if we get through this. And then we'll go to them, because I've also invited people to bring theirs as well. And so I just kind of want to save that for the final segment here. Should we do the Reek trade first? First of all, what do you think his value would be on the market? What do you think he could fetch?
I think it's team dependent. I think, again, like I said, Miami are getting rid of someone like Ramsey, and they're looking for that boundary corner with elite speed, depending on how they wanted to play their defense. That could be a perfect landing spot for him. He seems to have the swag to play in Miami, and they could offer, bearing in mind where he is in his contract,
like a 4, maybe
4. I said it at the 3 tops, I think. I think a 4 would be.
Let's go conservative and add a 4th round pick. Are you guys okay with that?
I'm okay with it. I think in terms of comp pick, if he leaves us as a free agent next year, the worst you're going to get is probably a 4th, right?
There you go.
Possibly a 3rd. So all you're really doing is bringing that forward a year to try and capitalize on a strong position this year. And if we're taking a defensive tackle because it's strong and getting a corner early, I think that just makes sense. I think that's fairly logical. Anything less than a 4th for me just doesn't make sense.
And Miami really is a good match. They have 10 picks. They can afford to make this move. They're probably going to at some point get something for Jalen Ramsey. So maybe it's kind of an even swap for them. 116 is kind of what's sitting there. See that right there?
Yeah.
Does that feel like fair value?
I take it, bear in mind on where we took him and his up and down production. Like I said, I've been mulling over this. As soon as I saw the Jalen Ramsey news come out, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, Reek would fit really well there.
Well, PFF says this trade would be accepted. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think Sam Howell might have value on day 3 to somebody? If he does, though, we're probably talking about a 2026 pick, aren't we?
Or a pick swap, maybe. Maybe we move up from a 6th to a late 4th or something, and maybe.
All right, so we're here at 18, and let's take a look. So pretty chalky early on. PFF's got this dialed into what they're hearing, although they have Sanders going to the Giants at 3. I don't think that's happening, so that's a little off, but it doesn't really impact the rest of the board. Barron, first corner off the board at 12. That's a little surprising. Will Johnson right behind him, so he's not available. So to stick to our hot takes, do you go, this is early for Ravel, and I guess we could play around with the trade down. I just, I kind of, in the sake of time, didn't want to mess with that. But to your point, Mitch, that, if the ACL checks out, this was a top 15 player heading into the season, right?
I agree.
And then he got off to an incredible start. The first 4 games, he had a couple pick sixes and he was flying high. Just for the sake of this exercise, should we take Siobhan Ravel here?
Yeah, I think so. And like you say, if we weren't sort of more time conscious, we could maybe look experimenting with moving down past 24, 25 to do that. But I still think you're getting a lot of player if he's checking out medically.
There we go. Now we got to stick to defense. Okay. So we're sitting here at 50. And this is the all board. We could do this. We could just go.
Just very quickly, one of our German Seahawk viewers has just said that the Reek trade didn't go through on this.
Well, then we still have a chance to fix that because we can force the trade. So let's go.
Eagle eye in the comments.
Jonas Meister.
Oh, was it? Of course it was.
On it.
Good eye. Thanks for catching that. All right. So we're going to get 116 from them. We're going to give them Reek Woolen, and we're going to force this trade then. Okay. Thanks for catching that. Appreciate that. Boom. Force it. Done. Okay, cool. All right. So we're sitting at 50. Let's go back to the draft a player night. Oh, it got rid of all my, let's do this. Let's just go safety, corner. We're not going to take another corner here. Defensive line, edge, linebacker. Okay. So here's our defensive board at the moment. Omar Norman Lott, Kevin Winston, Trey Amos. We're probably not going corner again here. Let's take them off of here. Okay. Braden Swinson, Demetrius Knight, JT Tuamoloau, Femi Oladejo, Jared Ivey, Andrew Makuba, Josiah Stewart, who you mentioned, CJ West, Shamar Turner, Alfred Collins, kind of the usual suspects here. What do you guys like? Should we take a defensive tackle? I said we're going to take 2.
Looking at what we've got there, and I'm quite biased to the Polynesians just due to a rugby background. So as soon as I see a Polynesian, I tend to usually go zero in on them because I know they're going to be a natural athlete. They're going to be a massive unit as well. But I think
Well, and I like Tuamoloau, and I think to Mitch's point, he'd be an interesting combo player. Let's see, where did they have him rated? Sometimes you can cheat the system a little bit by saying, well, we could wait till 52. Now this is to my point when I talk to people about taking Grant or Harmon in the first round. Look what's left on the defensive line.
Yeah, there's
you're talking about
drop off.
Norman Lott, who's a 3-tech only, kind of a pass rush specialist who wasn't even a full-time starter at Tennessee. Shamar Turner, who's coming off a rod in his leg that didn't heal right. We've been there, done that with Darrell Taylor. Don't want to do it again. CJ West is interesting to me, a player that I think is being slept on by a lot of people. He plays bigger than his size, but the drop-off's pretty severe. Alfred Collins, to me, might be the best choice here, but is that a little bit high? Because he is a true nose tackle, a guy that can really eat blocks there. I kind of like the idea of CJ West. Again, a guy that's sort of been slept on, 6'2", 317, although he's not a traditional nose tackle, but he can do nose tackle things and might be a nice compliment to Byron Murphy.
What have we got by way of sort of linebackers in this round as well? I know we've obviously got 2 picks really close together, but like I said earlier, I think this is where
Demetrius Knight is head and shoulders above the rest of them. Loved him at the Senior Bowl, and he's really one of the few bigger linebackers in this class. 6'2", 245, yet surprisingly covers really well. A guy that can play, will, and strong. Boy, if you don't take a linebacker here, when you look at the group, it's a pretty steep drop. You're getting down to Chris Paul at 83. And he's, a bunch of these undersized guys. Jeffrey Bossa at 110. He's a guy that played Mike, but is built like a Will.
Swessinger went just before.
I know. I was just going to say, I keep looking at that. And
trust me,
would have been a slam dunk.
Fans might be confused by that pick, but his tape is maybe. When we took Devin Witherspoon, what excited me the most about that pick was I remember saying at the time, and he had the most fun tape of any prospect I watched that entire year. I think to me this year, that's Schlesinger. Like his tape is the most fun to watch of anyone. But we got sniped. Should we take Demetrius Knight just because I think he is a guy, he's kind of a poor man's Jahad Campbell in a way that he can play off the edge and get after the quarterback a little bit. He is bigger. He could play if Ernest Jones, knock on wood, and anything should happen to him, he can play Mike for you. And he's a thumper. Like he plays north-south. He comes forward, but he does cover well enough that you can do some Malik Harrison type Baltimore Ravens kind of things with him as a third linebacker.
I think this would be for me in one of these Mike Mack, John Schneider drafts now. If you've lost out on one of those first round linebackers because we've picked a cornerback, I think this is where they're going to say, let's get the best linebacker available because that room's so thin on quality.
I agree. What about a combination, since we have the 2 picks that are almost back-to-back, of Demetrius Knight and CJ West?
I like that.
Yeah, I like it. What I really like is that this hot take pod is going to just stoke the flames. Taking that linebacker achieves that, I think. But I love the logic.
All right, so we got a stick. Okay. Whew, man. I'm looking at this board right now, and I just finalized. Well, I gave you guys a sneak preview before we went live here, but I'll be unveiling my final official mock draft on Monday, and that's the one where I try to be predictive. I try to predict what they will do. I got 1 pick right last year, and that was Byron Murphy, and then it kind of went off the rails. Although I gave myself half credit at 81, I took Dominic Pooney instead of Christian Haynes. Close. I almost got it. I'm almost there. I might tweak it again before I release it. But every year there's a couple of guys that I try to shape my mock around because I absolutely think that they walk, talk, eat, sleep like Seahawks. They scream Seahawk, not from a need perspective, not only from a need perspective, but from a character, personality, leadership, A+ character, smart, tough, dependable, all those things that the Seahawks value in that building. And he's sitting right there. And that's Femi Oladejo for me. The mayor.
Did we say we weren't taking an O lineman before day 3?
Yep. Not until day 3.
To say because that's no. It's for me. It's this. I can feel the rage from 12s maybe watching this at the fact that Tate Rattler just sat right there and we're just going to gloss straight over him.
Well, the Bengals have been sniping us left and right, in the real world, taking Jared Wilson at 81 there. And honestly,
Kevin Winston here.
I was just going to say, and because he's dropped, PFF has him ranked 29th coming off the ACL, but he ran his 40 a couple of weeks ago. He's a guy that, without that ACL injury, I think he's in the first round conversation. Yeah. And I think he looks like a Mike McDonald thing. We could kind of be sitting here where we take him at 82. Oh, Femi probably doesn't get to 92 though. They have him ranked at 60. I think safety is less of a need, honestly.
Yeah. And
I think Femi is a culture setting Seahawk person.
This is the last edge you'll get as well at this kind of level. Yeah. This is the cliff edge.
So. And I think he's also a guy that tip of the iceberg with him. He just converted his last year at UCLA from stack linebacker to edge, which adds to his versatility, but you're just kind of scratching the surface of what he can be as an edge player. I saw him in Mobile. He had 2 sacks in the game, and he was a terror the entire week. He's the guy that I want here.
For me, by way of sort of tone setting and leadership, every bit of scouting I've done with him, he is this year's Derek Hall for us.
That's the comp for me, kind of from a play style too. Like he has to add some tools to his pass rush tool belt, but he's got the one arm, the stiff arm like Hall had as kind of his signature move, and he can win with power and he can convert speed to power. Absolutely. And he'll hold the edge for you too. I think that's an interesting comp. Let's do it.
I think it's a great pick.
And if Kevin Winston lasts to 92, then we can just open the Christmas presents. Nope. But Andrew McCuba's there. Like, do you like a safety? Lathan Ransom's there. We've checked. Defensive tackle, we've checked. Really, I mean, safety's kind of what we're looking at, right?
I really like Makuba. I think if you last season or last year, he was ranked as one of the top 20 prospects for a long time, and he dropped off a little bit. I think mostly because of production. I don't know if it was injury or production alone, but last year he obviously didn't declare for the draft. There's a ceiling there which you could get to and have a serious player on your hands, but I think the stock has dropped. I think that's still a very, very good player to add to this safety room. And if you're going to have a lot of 3 safety looks.
Yeah, he really fits that profile. He played a lot less slot this last year because Barron did. Mm-hmm. Previous to that, though, that was kind of his preferred role. 2022 and 23, he played the majority of his snaps in the slot. This last year played more in the box and deep. That was kind of his primary role. I think that screams Mike McDonald, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so too. That's a fun pick as well. He's a very exciting player to watch too.
Yes. All right, now we get to day 3. Now we can take an offensive lineman. I mean, that's the priority here, right? And we're using the pick that we got from Miami. Like, this is a nice little, we gave ourselves some value here because our native pick is 137. So now we're sitting at 116. Let's see what we have. Interior offensive line.
This is where the comments really hate me.
Okay, so
I'm already watching them and like,
So there's a couple of, let's talk about some guys here. Okay. First of all, I don't know about you guys. I'm out on Willie Lampkin. You cannot thrive in the NFL at 5'10", 170. I don't care how good the tape is. I'm not taking him here. Seth McLaughlin is a center only from Ohio State coming off an Achilles tear. I've heard the Seahawks like him, but I think that's a redshirt situation. We need our starter here, right? Luke Kandra is a perfect scheme fit.
Can we look at tackles as well? Dylan Fairchild's there.
Yeah, we'll take a look at tackles. There are some guys that can convert and maybe move in there. And then there's a couple of guys right here. You mentioned Dylan Fairchild. Seahawks have met with him, right? Was he a 30 visit or a combine visit?
I know Jackson Slater was 30, wasn't he?
He wrestling background. There's times when I watch the tape, and granted, I had to give Ratledge a little bit of grace because he did play through an injury and had a surgery mid-season last year. But there are times when Fairchild looks like the better player on tape, and he's a natural left guard where with Ratledge, you'd be asking him to switch sides. And then Jackson Slater's a guy that Seahawks have met with like 27 times. Like he was the only team that met with him twice at the Senior Bowl, which means that outside of the sort of mandatory speed dating thing they do, where they get like 8 minutes with every prospect, they met with him a second time. They also met with him at the Combine. They also brought him to VMAC for a local 30 visit there too, or it didn't count as a 30 visit. So he's clearly a player that they like. Is he ready? Is he ready to start day one? Possibly. It's not a slam dunk.
For me, I'm looking at the O-line and I'm thinking a lot of these, if we're not going the McLaughlin, Lampkin, do we then look at sort of your Crenshaw Dixons, Jalen Rivers, Chris Lunt's there?
So I think we can double dip. If we agree on one of those guards, I think we can get Lunt at 137.
But then we also need to start looking at the wide receivers, the skill positions that we were saying. Because if we take it too late, it just becomes you're a core special teamer for the rest of your life with no upside.
Yeah, I think wide receiver immediately becomes the priority if we take. All right, so are we down to? Are we talking Slater versus Fairchild here, or is Kander in the mix?
We haven't talked about Connor Colby. I think Connor Colby could be a day one starter as well. I think he's
his zone grade, 81.3 zone grade. That's excellent.
He could be a day one starter for me. Super competitive guy as well.
Look at this. Colby projects as a potentially valuable, depth in a Shanahan style outside zone scheme. For me, it's Fairchild. What do you guys think?
I like the wrestling background, and he's one of those guys that just seems to win in a phone box. Like anything that's close to him, he eats it up. So I like the pick, and we've liked wrestlers in the past, right, as well. So
yeah. Oh, if Pete Carroll was here, he would for sure be the pick. He loves that wrestling bag.
Pure pedigree as well from Georgia. You're not going to be a slouch.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 sack allowed in his career. 1 quarterback hit allowed in his career. 12 hurries allowed. That's insane. Let's take Dylan Fairchild. Mm-hmm. Plus, he's got enough of a name that I think the fans would exhale. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a political pick,
especially if this was our sort of if this was the real draft. You could imagine everyone having absolute kittens at how this has gone.
And honestly, I think 211 is really low for him, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We're going to have to look at wide receiver next, aren't we? I'm a little bit afraid. Oh, guys.
Well, that's perfect.
Guys.
That's perfect.
Serendipity, isn't it? It's just, it all comes together, Dan.
Do we even need to talk about this?
Nope. Snap it off.
He's so underrated. Well, he has been a riser. Like I think people have caught up to him, right? But I think the 4th round's kind of the sweet spot for him. He is absolutely an outside receiver. I would do backflips, and I can't do backflips, but I would try, and I would probably break my neck. But I'd get to watch Kyle Williams from my wheelchair for the rest of my life.
Happy.
And then look at who's there now.
So
Ty Robinson's there. Tyler Shook.
To match all of our hot takes, we have to take a running back here, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think we've checked them all off. Let's see.
Taj Brooks.
We have to take another. We'd have to take a second defensive tackle, right?
Yes. Yeah. Taj Brooks is there, and that's fun.
Okay.
Super physical running back.
5'10", 230. Could he even play some fullback? He's not a guy I've studied much.
Mitch has been pretty high on him on most of our mocks. And every time he comes up, he's just like slam dunk that for your bowling ball running back.
I'm going to defer to you guys. Look at these PFF grades. 3,000 yards rushing the last 2 yards combined. 5.3, very consistent. 5.3 yards per attempt. 27 touchdowns, and he catches the ball a little bit too. 56 catches over the last 2 years, and he's a 3-year starter. Are you kidding me?
He's also a very, very physical runner as well. If you're going to pound the rock, he adds that to a running back room that doesn't necessarily have that bowling ball kind of tenderizing fourth quarter.
Kind of a poor man's Cam Scatterbo.
I'm pretty sure, Mitch, you mentioned him when you were talking about Omar and Hampton on one of our past pods. I think Taj Brooks came up in the conversation as well, where you were saying if you can't get someone like Hampton these are the players you look at, and I'm pretty sure Brooks was on that list.
The profile's very similar, I think, but there's productivity there in college too that means he's very relevant.
Guess whose tape I'm going to be watching tonight?
Yeah,
exciting.
So this is fun. This is a lot of fun for me. Well, first of all, I said 2 defensive tackles. They have Ty Robinson here. They have him ranked 122, so obviously he's fallen. You know, sometimes I'm torn between like sticking to the simulator when I know that they're low on a guy, but also he's 24 years old. He could slip.
I think we've handcuffed ourselves enough with our hot takes to be able to take a bit of fruit that falls, to be honest.
If he wasn't there, I would take Cameron Jackson in a heartbeat, because I think he's one of the guys in this class that can contribute right away as that guy. That he's limited. He's an early down guy, but he moves way better than you expect.
Before we go into this, just knowing how these draft simulators and the rankings work, we are probably going to have Nazir Stackhouse towards the back of this.
Yeah, and there's some other guys too. There's Thor Griffith, and there's you can get down here, and Griffith's fun. Stackhouse, Waya Black is usually still available too. Not today.
Tonka Hemingway.
Hemingway, boy, he was fun at the Shrine Game, wasn't he? Even Junior Tafuna, who's a guy that was a late ad at the Senior Bowl. I shared a plane flight with him. Real versatile guy that can move all up and down the line. But I think the fact that we know that Ty Robinson has been connected heavily to the Seahawks. Tony Pauline talked about how much they love him. They've had him in the building. He's a versatile guy. He can play just about everything up and down the line. I think that's kind of a no-brainer, given that we know there's connections there, right? And I think
makes sense.
I think it's a compatible skill set with CJ West. He's going to be more of an inside player. He's going to play more 1 technique, 0 technique, but Robinson can move all over. He can play 5 and 7 and come in and play 3 and even play nose on occasion. You just
that's the multiplicity you're looking for, isn't it? With someone this far down.
I think we've checked all our boxes, so we can just do whatever the hell we want in the 7th round.
Wide receiver. Give me a wide receiver, for the love of God.
A second receiver? You want a second one?
Let's see who's there first, actually.
Yeah, true. I mean, we did get a wide receiver that's a good fit. Yeah. So maybe tight end as well. See what tight end's looking like in here.
Tight end, actually.
Great call. Yeah, and there's so much depth in this class. Let's get rid of the receivers here and just go tight end, even though we missed out on the top ones.
Gadsden, Brent Coit.
Ooh, PFF doesn't go as deep on this class as some other guys that I thought. Usually you see Conyers in this range. You see Bartholomew in this range. Matavao from UCLA is a guy I know Bryce Coots really likes. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He was solid, not a guy that has any one outstanding trait. 6'6", though, 263. You like the size there. Gadsden's a guy that I know has some love. Those are really good PFF grades over his career. Goodness. Intriguing due to being potential size mismatches. A big slot receiver. Blocking needs some work, but that's, what do you expect in the 7th round, right? We're kind of running out of options here. Which one do you guys like?
I don't mind Gadsden here. He's got productivity. I think the blocking can improve. The fact that he can work out the slot's really good for the scheme.
We don't need him. Yeah, we don't need him to be. I mean, AJ Barner's a good enough blocker. You can add different skill sets to that group. Want to do that?
Yeah, I like it. And Fant can still be your field stretcher, as well. So
we have just re-signed Brady Russell as well.
Yeah, indeed. All right, we are wide open. We have no rules to follow on this last pick. Do we take a quarterback?
Seth Hennigan.
Not with that. Really?
No.
I listened
to your pod the other day.
Yeah. Do you guys? You heard my take on the Gruden thing then? Like, he's just so quiet and unassuming. Like, that just doesn't. That's not a tilt the room guy at all. And granted, you're not drafting him to be that guy. This is going to be, especially because I think they might carry 3 quarterbacks on the roster this year. This is going to be your practice squad guy. But boy, that's an unimpressive list, isn't it?
I don't think we need a quarterback. I don't think a quarterback is even going to be on our radar.
Yeah,
based on who we've got in the building at the moment.
Plus, let's be honest, you're sitting at 234. You've checked a lot of boxes. You're looking for a guy that can, contribute on special teams. Maybe
Malachi Moore's still there.
Oh my goodness, you guys. I don't think this happens in real life, but Jalen Travis sitting there at 234. That's the one thing we haven't really gotten in this draft is I want to come away from this draft with a young tackle that ideally can play left and right, right? You get what we hoped Stone Forsythe would become, right? That young swing tackle that if Cross should go down, he could step in there and he can help you win some games. But also, I want to hedge myself for the possibility of Abe Lucas not being on the roster in 2026, because there's a very strong possibility one of either two things is going to happen. Either that knee is just too much of a concern, even though he's fully healthy now, he's able to attack the offseason for the first time in 2 years. But because it was so mysterious before they finally figured out what was wrong and how to fix it, like maybe they're concerned about the long-term impact. Maybe it's a chronic or degenerative thing, right? Or he's healthy for 17 games and looks like the Abe Lucas is a rookie, and now we got to pay Cross and Lucas at the same time. They might let him walk.
Yeah.
Jalen Travis at his size is so explosive in his pass sets and how he gets back 6'7", 340, and it's shocking. I think he's a guy that can project as your long-term right tackle. He's a guy that I would immediately like more than Michael Jarrell. And I'd be shocked if he was here in real life. But like I said, if he is, I'm not even thinking twice about him. But there's some other options. We know that Sam Brown is a guy that has met with the Seahawks. He's a guy that Justin Mello from the Draft Network was talking up as he had him in his mock draft in the 7th round to the Seahawks. 6'2", 195, a guy with legit speed.
Outside specialist as well,
Yeah.
which is a soft spot. So.
Andrew Armstrong is a bigger bodied receiver that has maybe the most natural hands in this draft for me. 6'4", 200. Like, he snatches the ball out of the air, and he's probably top 3 blocker among the wide receivers in this class that I've watched. You have Zoff Frazier, who's kind of Reek 2.0, right? From UTSA, converted wide receiver.
I don't want another one of those things.
There's an interesting, and then Malachi Moore, a guy who's a little undersized, but Kalen DeBoer was just on Seattle Sports yesterday, local radio here, talking about just high IQ, just really smart, really good locker room guy that would probably help you on special teams too. Who do you guys like here? For me, it's Travis. I want to add one more big body.
I like the Travis pick. I think taking Travis here would make the roster cuts fascinating, because you remember how many O-linemen we took on the roster last year.
Right, exactly.
There'll be a lot to boil down. But
plus, you get to this point, and we're only 15 picks from the end of the draft. Like, some of these guys are going to go undrafted. You're going to get some value. Like, let's just take a look. Let's just take a peek. These are some of the guys. Oh, see, here you go. Bryce Cabeldew, who we know they had for a 30 visit, one of the most athletic tackles in the entire draft. Isa Pole from Washington State, who was a 30. Those guys are going to go undrafted. I think the value is pretty similar there. So, gosh, Craig Woodson, I'm surprised is still there, but he's an older prospect. Do you want to go with one of the receivers here?
You know what? I'd be happy to take a tackle here with everything that we've said about the offensive line and how it's a glaring need for us.
So let's go with one. So I know let's give a tip of the cap to our buddy Bryce Coots. He is incredibly high on Cabeldew. And this guy, you look at his RAS score, like, he is athletic as all get out. He's one of those guys, when you go to Kansas Tape and you go to watch Logan Brown, you're like, wait a minute, who's that other guy? It'd be either he or Pole, right? Or is it Travis? Is it Travis and you sign Cabeldew in free agency because he's a guy that can also project into guard?
There's only one of those.
I don't want to say Pole because we've already got a Coug.
All right, I'm doing it. Jalen Travis. Screw it. I just think he's a dynamic athlete for that size, and I think he's a guy that could be your right tackle in 2026 if you move on from Lucas. All right, guys, we got an F for our first pick.
PFF know nothing.
Gotta love PFF though. So this is our hot take mock draft, following all of our hot take rules. We go Siobhan Ravel in the first round. What? A corner? He was a top 15 prospect before the ACL, and he should be fully recovered by the time camp comes around. Demetrius Knight in the second round. He's one of the few bigger inside linebackers in this draft, but he can play will. He can play on the edge a little bit. He can be that third linebacker. But a guy also that, look, I don't think the team-friendly number that we got on Ernest Jones this offseason wasn't just out of the goodness of his heart. I think there are some concerns about the knee. And I like Drake Thomas in some ways. I'm not I'm not all that comfortable with him being the full-time starter if Jones should go down. I think Knight kind of fills that role, but he can also be your third linebacker. CJ West is a really underrated defensive tackle that can play nose for you. Femi Oladejo, we talked about, is an A-plus absolute Seahawk character, but also a guy who's just scratching the surface of what he can be as an edge player. And he has stack linebacker experience. Makuba, that versatile chess piece as a safety that can play the slot. He can play in the box. He can play deep. Dylan Fairchild is your starting left guard as a rookie. I don't care what PFF says. Kyle Williams is an absolute steal. I think of this class, he might be the greatest value that we took. And a guy that I think his skill set's really complementary. It's something they don't have on the roster right now. They just don't. Taj Brooks is a running back that you're really high on, and the numbers show it. And I'm going to watch some tape as soon as we're done here. Ty Robinson is a versatile defensive lineman, can move all the way up and down the line of scrimmage, and a guy that we know the Seahawks like. And he's just high motor all the time. Never have to worry about effort from that guy. Gadsden's sort of a move, Y tight end, sort of an oversized slot that would fit in well with those 12 and 13 personnel packages. And then you get a guy at 234 and Jalen Travis, who's a 340-pound tackle who has experience playing the left side. He can do it in a pinch, but I think he projects as your long-term right tackle. I don't hate this draft, even though we tried to follow some really bizarre rules.
PFF do, and this is what this is something that obviously we'll address when we get to the comments. But this is, please bear in mind, this is all about hot takes. This is not how it's going to go, but this is based on our hot takes, and they are just hot takes.
Absolutely.
I think pretty much every single pick in this draft, whether it's in the position they're in or not, you'd accept as a Seahawk for positional depth, some value there as well. The type of player they are, what they'll add.
That was fun.
I enjoyed that.
Shall we dip our toe into the comments?
Yes.
All right, guys. We'll try to go
O-line. I'll
get back to the beginning, but we'll kind of skim through these. There's 300 of them here. Bryce Coots, there he is. He's probably pissed that we didn't take Cabeldew in the 7th round. But hey, we signed him as an undrafted free agent. I texted him while you weren't looking, and he's already on board. He's already on his way to Seattle. So he's our priority undrafted free agent. Thank you for the donation, by the way, Bryce. Hello, gentlemen. I want your thoughts based off John Schneider's comments yesterday on his show. Do you believe the Seahawks still have quarterback in their thought process for the draft? I believe Seahawks won't draft a quarterback until they have a top 10 pick. It sure doesn't make sense now. Like, again, maybe I'm taking a guy with one of those picks in the 7th because there's someone left that I like, and it might be tough to convince him to sign as an undrafted free agent because of the depth in that room now. And so you just draft him and throw him into the mix. I felt pretty strongly they would take one of those guys in that middle tier out of this class that I'm a little higher on than a lot of other people are until they sign Drew Lock.
I'm not high on, and people can shoot me down in the comments or on social media for this. I'm genuinely not high on any of the quarterbacks in this. You know, previously we've had drafts where you've had your Andrew Lucks come out. You've had, even the draft with Russ. Like, I remember watching the Rose Bowl game with Russ and saying, I want this guy to be a Seahawks QB. And sort of like the last few drafts where there's been QBs come out, and I've even Cam Ward. I've watched him and I've gone, he's a good QB. But is he a true first pick overall if you base him on the last 5 years average, which then drops everyone else down in those rankings? I'm the same. I think it's going to be, we'll wait until if we ever get a top 10 pick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is such an important draft because it's the first one that Mike McDonald really was involved in the process from the first moment. And so I think this draft is going to reflect more of the team he wants to put on the field and the style of football he wants to play. And we feel good enough about the roster as a whole and how young it is generally, how many guys are on rookie deals, and how evenly the talent is spread out amongst most of the position groups. And then you look at what the books look like in the future after the DK and Geno trades. No dead money in 2026, right? They're in such good shape that this draft should kind of check the few remaining obvious boxes, which is going to allow you in 2026, if Sam Darnold should not play as well as they hope, or not take a step forward, or there's any concerns about his long-term viability as a franchise quarterback. Because I have said this from the day they signed him. I truly believe that they didn't just do this as a stopgap because they had to turn somewhere because they were blindsided by Geno. They see him as a guy. Option number one is that he's going to be their 10-year quarterback. That's what they're hoping for. But if they should see any signs that that's not the case, or they just want to have a guy behind him, because John Schneider saw it happen in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and they saw it with Jordan Love and the Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins thing, or whatever, that, Howell's in the last year of his deal. He's off the roster next year. Locke's on a 2-year deal, but it's not prohibitive at all if you want to move on. He'll be 30 in 2026 also, that it would make a whole lot more sense to draft a guy next year. And if there's a guy you fall in love with, you could even be aggressive and move up because you can afford to give up draft capital because your roster is going to be so stocked.
And John's been high on Darnold since his draft class.
Yeah.
He's outright
Absolutely.
said that. So
yeah. And that means a lot to Schneider. And we just saw that again in Drew Lock. He was high on him coming out in the draft. He wanted him to be part of the Russell Wilson trade. It was one of the reasons he preferred the Bronco trade to others, irregardless of what Wilson was going to do with his no trade clause. And we saw it again. They tried to re-sign him last year, but he had a chance to go be a starter somewhere. They got a third chance to bring him back, and they brought him back again. Those initial evaluations matter. And that's interesting too when it comes to those 30 visits. Like, people wonder, why did we bring Jalen Milroe in? Well, because maybe in 2029, when he's at the end of his rookie deal, and maybe he's available and the Seahawks need a quarterback. Like, you just don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Scott asks, thanks for the donation, Scott. I believe they'll be taking corner, receiver, offensive line is the way to go first. What is your order? Yeah, we've talked about that a little bit. I think given these three positions and the way that the board lines up with our picks, I kind of think in that order, like we were talking about, with one exception. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm not so sure that some of the buzz about wide receiver in the first round is off base. I think there's a couple of guys there that they would have good grades on. It's just a matter of what you want that first pick to sort of represent. And I think the tricky part about taking a receiver there, even though you can get excited about it and you can justify it, is that the entire fan base is then going to have to go to sleep and wait 24 hours and think, wait a minute, we were told this was going to be a physical team built in the trenches. What are we doing? Mm-hmm. That would be my only concern there.
I think as well the wide receiver and O-line pick, if we're assuming corner as the first, they might as well be the same pick because it's 50 and 52. And I think you're taking whatever falls, the highest value that's fallen. They might as well be equivalent, those two.
Dougzilla Monster, always good to see you. He says it could be hard to draft a better nose tackle than Murphy. Murphy's 305 pounds on his best day. I don't want to see him playing nose tackle full time. Just because he can do it doesn't mean it's the ideal spot for him. And if you can find a guy that can play that role and play those techniques and allow Murphy to play more 3 technique, I think you're going to get the best version of Byron Murphy. And also, this falls into that category we were talking about earlier of taking advantage of strengths in a draft class. When was the last time we had a draft class with a bunch of 320 plus defensive tackles? There's been a dearth of those guys. Mm-hmm. Last year's a good example. It was Tavondre Sweat, and that was kind of it. And really it's been a 3 or 4 year run where those guys are hard to find. And you have a lot more of the 295 to 300 pound guys, which Murphy is. And yeah, he can look like a nose tackle this time. It's just not what you, at times it's
wasted talent at nose. If you ask me, for a player that talented, you look at what he did in college. If you stick him at nose, what's he doing? He's trying to collapse a pocket from the interior, or he's stopping a run. Why would you waste that talent by putting him there? Put someone, a bigger bodied nose tackle in there, and let him do his thing on the outside or 3 tech.
I'm going to go down to some of our newest comments first, see what people think about our draft, right?
Brace yourself.
I like this perspective. Gary says, from your side of things, I always think of the draft as a lottery. It's exciting, but you really have no certainty in your picks. That's important perspective to have. If I had $1 for every viewer or Twitter follower that came after me with like, we have to do this, or don't touch that guy, he can't play, or you have to take this guy because he can't fail. Like, history would suggest that you're all wrong, because even GMs, even the people that are paid millions of dollars to do this full time and have all the luxuries of all the technology and a full staff and people out scouring the country. And it's remarkable how often teams get these picks wrong.
So Mitch and I have said, so Tetero McMillan, everyone is sort of banging the drum for possibly being a pick 18 for us. But after his comments about not watching film, he is not a football guy. He's not a mic guy. But if he gets drafted elsewhere and just explodes because of natural athleticism and ability, you're going to be kicking yourself. So it's pure lottery.
And I'll push back a little bit against that, Josh, because I've said this. You know, I had the same reaction when I saw that clip too. That clip was from 3 years ago. He's a 19-year-old true freshman. And he was asked, like, do you like watching film? And he goes, no. Well, guys like that are 6'5" and are a 5-star recruit like he was, did he have to watch 1 second of film in high school?
To be that good.
Like, go run a 7 route, right? Go deep, and I'm going to chuck it up to you. He was probably in that moment just learning how to watch film. The Seahawks had him in their building. If he falls in that category for me, and I was out on Tet McMillan for reasons other than just that, there's all the stuff you've heard. You know, there's sometimes he doesn't run the hardest route if he's not the intended receiver, stuff like that. If the Seahawks take him at 18, that immediately tells me they don't have those concerns. They're not going to take him to 18 if there's any question about his football desire, because that's their MO. And so that would be a classic example of a pick where he might not be my favorite pick at 18, but if he is the pick, I'm immediately okay with it. Yeah. And I'd get excited because the skill set and what he can do for you is unique to this draft. Even as much as I like Jaden Higgins can't quite do some of the things that Tet McMillan can do. John McGrath says, waited way too long to take a tight end. I agree and I don't. Well, first of all, we were bound by our rules. I'm typically taking a tight end in day 2 because there's a lot of dudes there that I really, really like. Mm-hmm. And I especially like some of the guys that can give you more than one thing. Harold Fannin is a guy that I wasn't that high on coming out of the Senior Bowl just because he has such an awkward athletic style. It's hard to wrap your head around the way he runs and how tight his hips are. But the tape is the tape and the production's the production, and he can give you fullback reps and do it really well. Conversely, when I do wait, there are some guys that I usually get on day 3 that I really like that weren't there by the time we came around to tight end because we had to go wide receiver. So we were bound by our rules there. I think if we could have gone offense on day 2, we would have taken tight end much sooner and got one of those guys that are more generally accepted to be because Jalen Conyers is another guy that I take a lot in that 4th, 5th round range. We know the Seahawks have met with him. He's got Wildcat quarterback experience. He could kind of be your fullback and almost maybe your Taysom Hill a little bit. He's got some quarterback in his background. He's not built like a traditional tight end. So there's some other guys there that we could have played around with.
I think as well, when you look at it, a lot of Seahawks fans, mocks are taking that day 2 tight end. But what they're not getting necessarily in those mocks is a high quality edge rusher. They're not necessarily getting a new starting corner. They're not getting fit for purpose D-line help for an aging D-line. There are things we've touched on in this draft and reinforced, and the linebacker situation as well, that other drafts aren't necessarily getting to. So we've kind of put ourselves in a situation where we've covered other things. The tight end room with Fant and Brady Russell, that's already good. AJ Barner had a great year and he could be even better this year. Mm-hmm. It'd be nice to get a tight end of high quality, but that tight end room isn't as desperate for starters as the cornerback room, for example. So, yeah. And
I think the opportunity here is if we were going to make that choice, if we weren't bound by our rules, is at 50. Like instead of an inside linebacker, as much as I like Demetrius Knight, and he screams, you talk about the person off the field too, he's a Seahawk. Like he's going to have a high grade from them when it comes to those intangibles, as well as his playing style. But that's where you might get Mason Taylor there. You might get Arroyo or Terrence Ferguson there. Or if you love Fannin, that's probably the range for him too. So that would have been the opportunity if we didn't have that rule that we had to stick to, for sure. And there's guys that PFF didn't have on their board. Corbin Smith was on my show the other day. We talked sleepers, and he brought up, I think his first name's Anthony Torres from Toledo. Mm-hmm. And he sent me a side-by-side today, really productive player. his RAS profile compared to Colby Parkinson, and it's almost letter for letter. Yeah, it's like he's an inch shorter, but all of his testing scores are almost identical. It's like copy and paste. Really, really intriguing guy. And there's, there's tight ends everywhere that we've probably never even heard of, right?
People can rest assured as well, when you do the mock with us, you did take Mason Taylor at pick 82.
What's that?
When you did the mock on our Draft Crushers episode, you did take Mason Taylor at 82. Yeah. So,
I don't think he gets to 82. I'd be thrilled with that now. Yeah. Let's see. We had a good one here. Hang on a second. Zach says, I'm not putting money on Ratledge. I do think watching the combine and automatically falling in love with guys. I don't think any of the Georgia O linemen should be second round picks. My goodness. That's a hot take. That is a hot take. I think those guys are all so legitimate. Here's a good example. You know how good they are? Clay Webb couldn't crack the lineup at Georgia. Clay Webb was a 5-star recruit, the #1 center in the country, went to Athens and sat for 2 years because he couldn't beat these guys out. And then he goes to Jacksonville State and he's an FCS All-American for 3 years and was one of the standouts of the Senior Bowl and one of my day 3 crushes, elite pass protector. Couldn't get on the field. Like, that's how good these guys are. I think they're all legit. And we've talked about the idea of, in a number of ways, and I'm not the first one to think about this, but actually Daniel Jeremiah was the first one to bring it up at the combine. He said, I'm surprised more teams that need an interior offensive line don't draft teammates. It's like a cheat code, right? And then Matt Miller was on local radio here talking about that idea. Specifically at 50 and 52, he suggested the Seahawks should take Ratledge and Jared Wilson. Well, with where Dylan Fairchild is ranked, like, if they were a little bit more bereft of talent, and they're not, as you mentioned earlier, Christian Haynes is going to be our starting right guard. I believe in the 2 centers that we have on the roster. But if you wanted to remake your interior offensive line in a draft version of what the Vikings went out and did by signing Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, right? You could draft Tate Ratledge, Jared Wilson in the 2nd round, Dylan Fairchild in the 3rd or 4th. There you go. Those guys are legitimate. They're all NFL starters. And I think they're NFL starters from day one.
Yeah, and taking those partnerships as well in any sport where you play in tight positions and tight sort of spaces, that is essential, because after 3-4 years of playing together, you develop this sort of just the mind meld where where each other's foot is going to go, what's going to happen, and it'd work on an offensive line, a defensive line. And
yeah,
I wouldn't be opposed to it, but
it'll be interesting to see this year too, because one thing that stood out to me at the Senior Bowl too, on the other side of the ball, is there were a lot of teammates. Well, even on offense, LSU has a bunch of guys too. They got Miles Frazier, they have Emory Jones, Garrett Dillinger. Like, you could go heavy there if you wanted to. Ohio State, certainly you could draft Seth McLaughlin. You could draft Josh Simmons in the 1st round, Donovan Jackson in the 2nd round, and Seth McLaughlin in like the 4th round. If you really have offensive line
interior line done.
Yeah. And then wait till next year and take their right guard and their right tackle, right? Like, it's not a bad idea. And then draft Will Howard and stick him behind. Maybe that's what the Raiders will do. Yeah. No, it's an interesting idea. And on the defensive side of the ball too, like being in Mobile, there was like, gosh, that Ole Miss, right? You had Walter Nolan, you had JJ Pegues, you had Jared Ivey and Princely Uman-Milan. And it's funny because I was thinking about that the other day, and I thought, why wasn't that defense better? And then I looked it up, and they were 2nd in the country in points allowed. Like, it was pretty good defense. Trey Amos. And then who's the linebacker too? Pooh. Oh shoot! Now I can't remember the kind of the undersized inside linebacker too. Yeah, they were loaded. Holy crap! Well, that was fun, guys. That was fun. Now watch the draft end up looking more like this than the actual predictive ones that we do. That I'll be unveiling mine on Monday.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to just do this from a completely different angle. It wasn't just simply taking a different player in round 1. It was a whole different ethos. And it's sort of weirdly tied into what we've had in visits as well. A lot of the linemen that we've had come in are later guys. We've had some of the premium corners come in.
Yeah.
So we are kind of aligned a little bit with how the visits look. So interesting.
Yeah. And it also, like, I purposely, intentionally this year tried to force myself to dial back on doing mock drafts a little bit. and would sometimes go a week in between. And I'm just talking not just on the show, but personally. Like I think last year I probably did 1,000 of them. This year it's probably about 20% of that, which is still a lot, but it's a problem. But you fall into patterns and traps, and you fall in love with guys, and you have a hard time. This forced us to look at it from a different way and kind of go outside our comfort zone. In which case, I think in some ways it kind of ends up being a more realistic process because you don't know what other teams are going to do. You don't know who's going to be on the board. And if you use the same simulator all the time, you get the same guys in the same ranges. So it was fun to mix it up.
Well, Mitch and I are that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, you end up having your own prejudices as well. You have your biases and your habits. And this kind of just set a framework that meant that none of us could really follow any habits. It was just, it was a really interesting exercise. Even if the comments, and the viewers screamed through it. It was.
If anyone joined us late, right, and didn't hear the whole setup, they're probably thinking, "What the fuck are these guys?" It was like,
what are these two Brits talking about? They don't know football.
One of the Yahoo Sports guys, one of the national guys, the other day did a mock draft. Maybe you guys saw this, and he did it specifically from a standpoint of what I would do for each of the 32 teams in the first round. And it was crazy. There were all sorts of, and the craziest pick was Jack Besh to the Bears at 10. And
wow,
how quickly that went viral with screenshots of like, what the F is this guy doing without any context? And then people take it and run with it. And I spent some time like trying to, and then I just gave up. I was like, you just can't get ahead of the wave of people thinking that this guy's just absolutely nuts. Putting a second, third round receiver at number 10.
This is why we toned back on all of our mocks this year. We got you guys to do that on the pod instead.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, tell everybody what your draft plans are this year on the channel.
So we have got a pre-draft party pod that we're going to be doing. So we'll be recording before the draft goes live with a bunch of people from our Discord, our social media followers. We're going to be holding just some drinks, just a hangout really, live on YouTube and our socials, where you can come on, share a cocktail and give us your best mocks so far. And we're going to be doing that. We've got 2 of the German Seahawkers coming on, some of the UK Seahawkers. We've got our Discord is full of people from all over the world. So they're all going to come in and have sort of 15, 20 minutes just to sort of shoot it all with us and sort of really start going through it that way. And it's just going to be a nice sort of party time. It's going to be nice to see everyone's thoughts on how this draft is going to go from different standpoints.
Nice.
And then the watch party in our Discord after as well. So
yes,
if anyone joins us for the party pod and then wants to watch the draft in our Discord with us, there'll be a whole group of us discussing it and check, because you've always got minutes between picks. And Charlie Wilson, the tabloid journalist in the UK for the Express,
and the Mirror,
he comes in with some great gossip and tidbits. I mean, he called Penix to the Falcons 15 minutes before it happened.
Wow.
He told us that was happening. So and he joined in with the watch party and was dipping in and out and giving us the bits of news as they were coming. So yeah, definitely get involved with either the party pod or the watch party or both.
You got Dan, so whilst you're doing yours and we're in our Discord watch party as well, I'll be putting comments in on your YouTube to say we've just heard this.
I've got 2 monitors here. I think I might also have my laptop set up too, so I can kind of go around, and my TV will be showing the draft, of course.
Yes.
I have a quick funny story, and actually I think this was a sort of an unintended boost, sort of a silver lining thing for the channel when I initially set up Seahawks Forever after Vox Media shut down the Field Goals podcast. Is I did a live draft party, or tried to, 2 years ago. So that would have been the Devin Witherspoon JSN year, right? And I was streaming the NFL Network feed, and then I was commenting on it. And it took them about an hour and a half. And then all of a sudden I couldn't, everything started.
So I went, oh crap.
Weird. People were telling me there's no audio. And then all of a sudden, yeah, sure enough, copyright strike, dumb me, rookie mistake. Like I should have known better, right? Like these images are not authorized for, so I got a 90-day live stream ban.
Wow.
3 months into Seahawks Forever. which forced me then to, have to focus on just pre-recorded and post-produced material, which really kind of helped the channel grow in some ways. And then helped me to learn some editing techniques and some other things too, and kind of come up with what is still now sort of the look and feel and sort of the identity of the channel. And then once that ban elapsed, I was able to get back into live streaming, and now I've got the balance. But yeah, so a little funny story there. I won't make that mistake again. I'll be watching that off camera, and we'll be watching it. And it's hard to sync it up, to try and stay away from like the Twitter bombs and guys getting out in front of it and all of that. But I'll have a bunch of guests hopping in. I'm going to go live day 1 and 2. So I've got a bunch of guests lined up, other podcasters and content creators that'll hop in at times. And then this is going to be fun. The Wednesday night before draft eve, as it were, we're going to do a live draft day watch party. The movie we're going to watch it together.
What a film. Apart from the Seahawks looking like absolute cretins during that film. My dad's a Browns fan, so he loves that film. And he just, every time he watches it, he's going, guess what film I'm watching?
I think I would have liked the movie anyway, because just the fact that Hollywood like committed to that idea, which is such a nerdy concept, and then put Kevin Costner in the lead, for crying out loud. But also the fact that the Seahawks are figured so prominently in it, even though it's ridiculous, the whole premise of the thing. But that makes it even more fun. And so we'll joke along and laugh along with it and have some drinks and eat some pizza or whatever. And I'm sure there'll be a debate about pineapple on pizza at some point.
All the whatever they want.
Can never get away from that. Yeah.
Like you said, people can have whatever they want on pizza.
It's a blank slate, man.
They're eating it.
It's a canvas. How am I bothering you by eating pineapple on my pizza? It's ridiculous. All right, you guys. Let's get out of here. Hold on. Let's take us out with Mitch and Josh from the 12 Talk Pod. If you don't subscribe to those guys already, get over and do it. They do great work, and they're a lot of fun. It was fun to have you on the show. Thanks for doing this exercise and playing along. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you all understood what it was. Okay, don't come after us. All right, I'm just having fun here. It's all just fun. Next week is when the bullets start to fly, and we'll have plenty. I'm sure you all will have plenty to criticize the actual decision makers of the Seahawks at some point. Everybody always has something. They'll find something to complain about, right? There's no such thing.
That's what we do.
Yeah. All right, you guys. Thanks. It was good to have you. We'll see you again soon. I'm Dan at Seahawks Forever on Twitter, and forever and always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.